So for today, this is a whole hog review of everything that we have learned so far. All right, and in the second part of class, we're going to have a little quiz on this stuff. So pay especially good attention. This is just a homework quiz. But if I asked you, for instance, how to graph a normal y equals 3x plus 1, would you please graph that for me? Just go off to the side and sketch that. Do you remember how to graph that? I bet you do. Ashlyn, do you know which of those two is the y-intercept? The 1 is the y-intercept. Okay, so I go up to 1, I put a dot there, and then what's the 3? Hello, what's the 3?
The slope.
The slope, good. So the 3 is the slope, and you'd have to graph this with a solid line or a dotted line? Do you guys remember? Solid, because it says equal to. If it's equal to, it's a solid line. I go up 3 and over 1, up 3 and over 1, and then how many of you knew how to graph that? Good. That's one of the things you'd have to do. Here's another thing you have to do. What if I give you 2 points, 2 comma 3 and 5 comma 8? Can you tell me the slope? Hint, it's the rise, which is the y's, over the run. Get the slope for me. Grace, tell me how you are finding the top part of the answer. Yep. 8 minus 3 over Avia.
Over 2.
5 minus 2. You have to keep it in that same order. Nice. Then 8 minus 3 is 5. Over 5 minus 2 is 3. 5/3 is the slope. How many of you feel like you could do that? Good. When would we ever change this to a dotted line if we change this to less than? Then all of a sudden this would have to be dotted. And one other little thing happens. Which way do we shade? Do you remember that? If it's a dotted line and this says less than, that's the way you say that one is less than, then you shade under it like this. Everybody change it to that. Make it a dotted line and shade under it. Here's the name tag. Okay, what else is on your quiz? Remember back to these 2 points? We found the slope of them was 5/3. Do you remember how to use this? Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Cell phones go away at this point. Okay, Kennedy, can you tell me where the slope should go? Yep. So this is going to be 5/3. And which of those get replaced with the point? These two. This and this get replaced with a point. Which point? You get to pick. Either one. EJ, pick a point.
5/8.
Okay, we're going to use 5/8. So I'm going to stick the 5 in here. Notice I went to the other end, because the 5 is the x, and we wanted an x. And this is the y is 8. I'm putting it there. So my final answer is y minus 8 equals 5/3 x minus 5. Can you leave it like that? Yes, that's actually a totally good answer. That's an answer that's in what's called point. Listen, this is the point. Slope. That's called point slope. What if I made you solve for y? Well, then you'd have to multiply this all out. It'd be a pain. I'm not going to do that on this one. But I am absolutely going to do it on something like this. Solve that for y. Don't overthink this. Just solve for y. Just get y alone. Ian, what are you adding or subtracting from both sides?
5.
You're adding 8. Y equals 3x, and then 8 plus the 5 makes 13. Who had that one right? Good. Is that the kind you graph with a solid line or a dotted line? Solid, because it says equals. If I change it to this, then it would turn into a, well, actually, wait. If I keep it or equal to, still a solid line. If you keep it or equal, you know, like greater than or equal, that's how you say that sign. Then I'd use a solid, and since it's greater than, I'd shade above it. So here's me graphing it really quick. I go to 13, which is like way up here, and then it has a slope of 3, so it's up 3 over 1, up 3 over 1, there, and then it says greater than, I'd shade above it. Then the last little thing for review is what if we have two equations? All right, everybody get this page of, not that page, it's too easy. Not that page. This is just describing, you know, sometimes they're dashed and sometimes they're solid. We already have discussed that, so I think you're okay there. Go to this page. See how I got two equations? If you shade one of them, and let's say one of them looks like this, and the other one looks like this, you got to be smart enough to go, oh, they overlap here, so that's the final answer is where they overlap. Okay, I want you to try this one. Hopefully you can figure out the y-intercept and the slope, and you can graph these puppies. All right, one last concept that we haven't talked about is parallel versus perpendicular. These have the same slope, or do they not have the same slope? Do those have the same slope? No, they don't. Those have different slopes. If they have different slopes, they will intersect. If they happen to have the same slopes, they would have been parallel, like train tracks. Okay. Do you remember ones like this? When they are opposite and reciprocal, as in like flipped. Do you get how those are opposite and flipped from each other? Then those are called perpendicular. That's the most complicated concept. I don't feel like it's that hard. If the slopes aren't the same, there's a chance they're opposite and flipped. And if they are opposite and flipped, then those two are called perpendicular lines. That means that when they cross, they'll make right angles. All right, so back to this. These were not perpendicular and they were not parallel because their slopes are just different. They're not opposite, flipped from each other, and they're not the same. All right, let's see if you graphed them right. We're going to start with Ashlyn. Can you read me where to start on this one? -6 where? On the y-axis. Very good. So here's -6. It's down 6 spots. I'm starting with a big dot there. Avia, where do we go from there to get to our next point? Notice there's only one number. -1. What the heck does that mean? Down 1. Good. But how far over do we go? If there's no number there, would you agree we could say it's over 1?
Yes.
So then it's down 1 and over 1. Down 1 over 1. Down 1 over 1. Down 1 over 1. Should we use a solid or a dotted line, Avia? For this first one, solid or dotted?
Dotted.
Yes, it's dotted.
Doesn't have equal to or equal to.
It doesn't have or equal to. So we just use a dotted. Okay, and which way should I shade? Above it or below it? There's still some people, sadly, who do not know if that's a less than or a greater than. Does it look like an L? Then it's a less than. And that means we shade on the lower side of it. Just like that. Grace, can you walk me through how to graph that one?
So basically, like, well, the line intercept is -2.
Start with -2, very good. And then I'm going to put this over 1, and then what?
Then you rise 3 and go over 1.
And I do it again. And I do it again. And I do it one last time. And then maybe even go down 3 and over 1, because that's where they touch, and that's like a big deal. There. Now, which way should I shade, and should it be solid or dotted? Grace, solid or dotted?
We'll shade to the right, and then it should be solid.
It should be solid, and wait. It says greater than. I know that feels like right, but your choices are above it or below it. Not right or left, above it or below it. Nope. It's shade. Oh, I'm reading it wrong. I'm so sorry. Are we graphing? Grace, which one are we graphing? Are we graphing the top one or the bottom one? Because I think I've been doing the wrong one. Okay. This one? All right. Well, that's a greater than sign. And your choice is graph and shade above it or below it. I'd like you to think that through one more time. It says greater than. Does that feel like above or does that feel like below? Above. Greater is above. Okay. Okay, so above this line. I know that's weird because it seems more like you should be picking left or right, but that doesn't work. You only can pick above or below, and this is the above part. And then, did they overlap? Oh, yes, they did. And they overlapped right in there. How many of you knew that I was going to be focusing on that part right there? Okay. If you had trouble with that, you should ask yourself, what's the part that I didn't get? Did I shade the wrong way? Did I use a dotted line when I should have used a solid? Did I not know how to do slope? What part was it? All right. So we got time to do another of these before we go to lunch. How would I start this one? Well, you could just start graphing right away. But let's fix this equation first before we start graphing. Megan, what are we going to add or subtract to this circled equation to get it solved?
Plus 3x.
Correct. Plus 3x on both sides. And I'm going to rewrite it as y is greater than, which means I'm going to shade above it, 3x plus 2. Notice I put the x first. And now I'm going to graph the 2 that I'm going to highlight with blue. I'm going to graph that. I'm going to graph this. One will have a solid line. One will have a dotted line. One of them has a negative slope right here. And that means that it's going down 1 and over 1. Let me just get you started on that one. That's what that one should look like. And then you got to decide solid or dotted line, shade above it or below it. Man, there's a lot to these problems. Pause for a second and give this a try. So for the rest of the hour, I just had the kids work on a quiz on this topic, and their homework is a worksheet that we will start after lunch. So that's all I have for the video for today.